All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from the capital of the college football, really just college sports universe as a whole these days. Top 5 in baseball, top 5 in football, top 5 men's basketball, top 5 in women's basketball. The accolades and rankings are endless in 2022 here in East Tennessee. Spent the morning in the Great Smoky Mountains. Lovely, lovely time. I'm a big foliage guy. It's one of my favorite things is foliage, flannels, hot coffee, all that good stuff is extremely my jam. Big mountain guy over here. Merrill Boots is my jam. Nothing better than to get away and celebrate with my wife and Khaleesi the dog after a monumental victory Saturday night here in Knoxville, Tennessee for the Tennessee Volunteers over the Alabama Crimson Tide, which we'll get into momentarily. But I am not alone. I'm also joined by my good friend, fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green. Matt, good evening, sir. How are you?
Good evening, sir. I had to mentally prep myself to come onto this podcast. As soon as that ball went through the uprights and Tennessee started rushing the field, I was thinking, what level of Chase Thomas am I going to get on this podcast today? I was wondering if we were going to just start the podcast playing Rocky Top or something. Yeah, man, it was an amazing day. I would say that's right. Fair enough. I would probably say the best day of college football so far of the season. Just Alabama wasn't the number one team in the country, but we all know what Alabama is. It's like this larger than life program. They've been a head and shoulders above everyone for the last decade. And anytime they go down, it's just huge. And especially when it's a team like Tennessee, like it's one thing for A&M to do it last year, right? Like 2 straight losses, weren't a contender. It's another thing when you're having a magical season and you're like, this could be our year, but we got to get by that Alabama regular season game. And then when you actually do, I mean, into 16-year drought. Was it 16? I lost count. 15 years?
Yeah. So this was year 16. They lost 15 straight.
Okay.
So this was year 16, yeah.
Just absolutely massive. And then just all the other games we had around the country too. There was a bunch of good ones. So it was an awesome Saturday. Unfortunately, the Braves, didn't get it done for us. But that's baseball for you. We just won the World Series with an 88-win team, losing the divisional round with a 101-win team. I feel like that's kind of law of averages balancing out for you. So, but yeah, it was an excellent Saturday.
Falcons awesome today. They've been awesome. Arthur Smith putting in work, beating the Niners in an upset today. So that was nice. Wearing those perfect, your uniform guy, the red helmets are just chef's kiss. Like
I'm
a perfect look.
I'm saying, man, once everyone knew that the Falcons were changing their uniforms, that's what like 90% of Falcons fans want them to be. Like, oh, we're going to go back and wear those throwbacks full time now? They're like, no, we're going to go like even more modern and have like the worst uniforms in the league. But yeah, no, the Falcons look great today. The Falcons, low key, what are they, 3-3 now?
They are 3-3.
Like they could be 5-1, maybe even undefeated right now. Like I thought they were going to be like the worst team in the league, honestly.
One of the worst rosters, but good coaching can amplify that. We've seen that with Tennessee. We had a walk-on playing cornerback on the last series for Alabama in the Tennessee-Alabama game. So next man up. It's hard to kill the Big Orange right now. We're just like Josh Heupel's just maybe even Hendon Hooker is just Jon Snow in Battle of the Bastards pulling out the sword. Alabama, Florida, LSU, Pitt, doesn't matter. He's going to war with everybody, and that's just how Vol Nation feels at the moment. Just going to war. I could just go on and on. You said you didn't know what kind of Chase Thomas you were in for today. Matt Green, let me just start off. The hottest of takes. It was cowardly by the AP poll not to put Tennessee at 1. There's absolutely no reason that this team should not be number 1 following the victory over Alabama. Florida obviously going down, but LSU beat it, just looking like $1 million on offense against Florida this weekend. They're back in there. I think they just missed the cut. They were like 26th in the AP poll rankings. But LSU's back. I mean, Pitt. You go through it. The only team to have 4 top 25 victories, and one of those being a top 10 team, top 3 team in the Alabama Crimson Tide. Look, Georgia's a great team. Ohio State's a great team, but the resume is just the strongest right now for Tennessee to be number 1. And in my case, is that like I don't think Tennessee should be number 1 in the coaches poll because I don't think they're the best team in the country. I would still lean either Ohio State or Georgia as the number 1, number 2. So I'd probably go Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Tennessee 3 in coaches. Like I think that's probably if they had to gun to their head, if they had to pick. That's how it should be. If I was pulling all these coaches, so text me or email me, coachesandcfb@chasethomaspodcast@gmail.com. But I don't know how, based on this kind of win and the momentum from this win and the offense being the best in the country, I mean, you just ride with it as an AP poll. AP poll does not mean you're the number 1 team in the country. It just means based on what we've seen thus far. And Georgia fans, like, you've thrown out we demolished the number 10 team Oregon Ducks in week 1. Great. You had some stinkers. Like, it just doesn't matter. Like, the stinkers happened. The Kent State still happened. The Mizzou happened. It's not going to obviously railroad your season, but, like, you struggled. Tennessee hasn't struggled like that against lower competition. That just hasn't been the case.
But if you talk about Pittsburgh, they don't exactly look like a world beater right now. It's like you did go to overtime with Pittsburgh. Florida is not exactly a great team right now. Like that was a 1 possession win. Mm-hmm. I think Alabama is probably the best win of the season that anybody has so far. Mm-hmm. But it's also, I think part of it is that Alabama it already had like a blemish in people's eyes. Like they barely escaped versus Texas, playing Texas without Quinn Ewers for 3 quarters. Barely beat a bad A&M team at home. So they'd already been downgraded to number 3, you know? So I feel like that was probably part of it, that while Tennessee, I mean, they got 15 first place votes. Like that's a lot of respect. Like I think Georgia's got 31, Ohio State was 17, and Tennessee with 15. So that's a lot of respect. Fourth, basically, of the AP poll voters giving Tennessee a number 1 vote. That's big time. I can't necessarily hate on any Tennessee fan. I can't disagree on any Tennessee fan thinking they should be number 1. It's hard looking at Ohio State's schedule because they've been so dominant. That's the team that I would say they haven't put up a stinker. But, I mean, Notre Dame looks worse and worse every week, so that they had that close game. But it's hard to evaluate Ohio State, but they're dominating everyone they're playing. So, I mean, yeah, you could split hairs and say one's 2, one's 3. Georgia's win over Oregon does look better week in and week out because the way they just absolutely obliterated them. I mean, 49-3. This team's the number 10 team in the country right now, and they're going to be tested. I think UCLA Oregon is this next week. So, I mean, if Oregon's the best team in the Pac-12, then that can kind of make Georgia's case for them as well. But luckily, it's all going to work itself out, and I feel like it's not even worth really getting worked up about because we're going to see in 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, Georgia and Tennessee line it up against each other. But this past weekend, so we talked about the undefeated teams. There was, 15 going into this past weekend? We knew we were only walking out with 12 just because we had the undefeated matchups. But we only came out of the weekend with 9 undefeated teams. So it was a pretty crazy weekend. Ole Miss is the other one. Like people talk about, the loser of Georgia Tennessee maybe having a better playoff chance than anyone else in the SEC. Ole Miss, they're still undefeated too. So it's that could get like if Tennessee, we saw what Tennessee just did to that Alabama defense. Like this Ole Miss offense could also give Alabama problems. So I don't know. I feel like this is one of the best years I can remember in a while of us having like so many legitimate contenders, like almost into November.
When was the last time Alabama lost 2 SEC games in the regular season?
The year Tua got hurt. They lost to LSU and then Auburn with when Mac Jones started that one. So
yeah.
Okay. But yeah, that's probably like the first one. I know McElroy's senior year, 2010. I think they lost 3 games that year. So that's probably, I think that might be the last time before 2019.
It's a rarity that they drop 2. So if you're an SEC West team to see Tennessee beat them, you're like, God, dang it. Like, what are the odds Alabama goes down twice in the regular season? And they're going to be pissed off the rest of the way. I did delight in Alabama fans complaining about officiating following this game. After so many years of dominance and everything else, to complain as an Alabama fan of officiating not going your way is just... It's another level of just absurdity of like, look, you're a fan, I get it, but things have gone really well. A lot of calls. We could do like a whole montage of calls and circumstances that have gone in Alabama's favor, missing holding ons. I mean, just look at the Alabama-Texas game. How many calls Texas just, I mean, blatant holds missed and things like that. That didn't go their way. And like, I'll save the rest of the Alabama-Tennessee takes. But
while you're on that topic, though, like so many people love to cite, oh, look how uneven the officiating is. We have 14 penalties and they have 2 or something. It's like, it's the same in basketball. It's like, oh, we have 12 fouls and they only have 3. It's like, well, maybe you guys are fouling a lot more. Like, you know, it's like, it doesn't mean that the refs are against you because there's more penalties. Like maybe you're grabbing more, maybe you're holding more, maybe you're false starting more, like whatever the case may be. Like, so, I mean, as a neutral fan in this game, I didn't necessarily think I didn't notice the officiating. I think that's all you really want in a football game. So I had the luxury of being around a few Alabama fans during this one. So that last pass interference near the goal line that set up, what was that, the touchdown that tied the game?
Yeah, the very next
for
play is
Tennessee.
4th and 5, and of course they turned it Jalin Hyatt. The exact same touchdown play call, by the way, that Dan Orlovsky against LSU, he drew up on. Do you remember on the board, like basically calling that game? He just called, oh, they're gonna call this to Jalin Hyatt, just this simple post pattern into the end zone, and that's exactly what Tennessee called after the pick got called back, and Alabama fans being upset about that not being a flag. It's like, no, he got there early. He hit early, and Hendon Hooker does that really, really well of putting the ball in places where when you're challenging defenses deep like that, you're going to get PI calls more often than not. When you put that much pressure on these DBs and you put the ball in a spot where, I mean, it just looks bad, where you're falling on top of the receiver, they're always going to go in favor of the receiver. I shouldn't say always. 9 times out of 10, they're going to go in favor of the wide receiver. So Hendon has done a great job of just, even if there's nothing there, placing the ball in an area where a flag is very likely. So that's just another part of what makes Hendon Hooker such a special quarterback. But we'll get more into Tennessee, Alabama momentarily. Was there any other main takeaway outside of our Tulane Green Wave making the AP Top 25 poll for the first time in forever, Matt Green? I love that. That was pretty good.
Yeah, I felt like NC State feels like one that's still in the top 25 because of their preseason ranking. Like they're not the team.
Because they're not counting that loss because Devin Leary didn't play. It was close. They're like, we don't really know what to do. It's like we all believe that they're still a top 25 team, but we'll give them a mulligan without Devin Leary.
And then Mississippi State, I mean, that's to be expected. It's they are what they are, right? It's like I feel like they're a team you can't really count on week in, week out, and they just laid an egg this week. So yeah, and then seeing Illinois up there at 18, I think there's just, like I said, there's a lot of parity. There's a lot of undefeated, one-loss teams that we weren't necessarily expecting. The Kansas States, the Syracuse, the TCUs, UCLAs, and I feel like a lot of those teams are legitimate contenders. Like I think Syracuse is probably the last one of that group, or Kansas State, but Syracuse is probably the last one of that group that anyone's really taking seriously. But luckily they get to decide on the field, and they'll be in Death Valley next week. So yeah, I'm excited.
TCU Kansas State this weekend, so that'll be resolved.
TCU Kansas State, yeah, and so we got TCU Kansas State, UCLA Oregon is where game day is going to be, right?
I believe so.
And then Clemson Syracuse. Like I if they hadn't already gone to Death Valley, I think Clemson Syracuse is probably the bigger one. I mean, the undefeated. They're both undefeated right now, but yeah, UCLA, Oregon. The Pac-12 feels like a much better conference this year than it has like the last, 5 years. Like we have like 4 solid teams up there at the top.
That's fair. You could even say more than that. And your team, quickly, because I don't think we're going to touch on Georgia Vanderbilt all that much. You really 55-0 defeated Clark Lee in this one, where he said after the game from friend of the pod, Chad Bishop, quote, "Part of the challenge now is accepting the result of an indicator of where we are." Just that is not what you want to hear about from a coach who said this summer that they're going to be the best football program in the country. This was my thing, man, with Vanderbilt, and it was nothing against Clark Lee, but it's just almost an unwinnable job in modern SEC. Like, when they were pumping it up and we're going to build these 3 stars and 2 stars and turn them into 4 stars in our program, I'm like, all right, sounds great when you haven't played any games. Like, that's something that's cool to put on the bulletin board, but, like, you can't be Wake. Wake plays a pretty manageable schedule year in, year out. You'll never have that. There's no path. Show me where the wins are coming. Who are you knocking off? Who are you going to be competitive with on this schedule year over year? And I don't know. I think Vanderbilt's in a really, really tough spot. I also just don't think they're building the right way. Like, the fact they're not running the triple or the air raid in 2022. What are we doing? Just write a blank check to Jamie Chadwell. Just run his fun offense and see what happens. But we'll get more into our college football takes in just 1 second. Don't forget, folks, if you're watching us on youtube.com, first off, thank you for checking out the program. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and like button as you're watching this very program. Helps other people find the show and helps this show continue to grow here on youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. You can also find us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you leave us a 5-star rating interview. Tell us why you like the show and all that good stuff. And hit that subscribe button if this is your first time checking out this very daily national show here on the Blue Wire Pod Network. Follow Matt on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. Follow myself at Chase_Thomas. You can follow the show page on Twitter at twitter.com/PodChaseThomas. And then, of course, you can always email this very program at ChaseThomasPodcast@gmail.com. Matt Green, yes.
Before you move on from Georgia, were you about to say something else?
No, I mean, that was it. Just that you killed the Commodore spirit.
Yeah, exactly. One thing, I don't think you can learn much from these type of games with Vanderbilt. They're just that bad. But you at least just want to see your team dominate the opponent like this. But Vanderbilt had like 150 total yards in this game. And you saw Georgia running the ball well and passing it well. But I think Kirby Smart has had a philosophical change in the last, maybe this season. But it's in terms of when Georgia gets up big on teams. You saw Carson Beck come in and go 8 for 11 for 98 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's something it doesn't feel like Georgia's done in the past. They've brought in the backup quarterback, and then he hands the ball off 25 times, and then you call it a day. It's nice to see the backup come in and actually get his reps as well. I think like the guys like Justin Fields transferring back in 2018, he would come in and probably hand the ball off, just do some design runs. I think you have to everyone wants some playing time, so you get the backup quarterback in there, let him throw the thing out a little bit. So Carson Beck looked good in this one.
For sure. There you go. Your Georgia minute. But, I mean, if Georgia takes care of business in the Florida game and Tennessee takes care of business against Kentucky, is this going to be the biggest Tennessee-Georgia game of all time?
Are you overlooking UT Martin this week, sir? I mean, come on now. Yeah, I think it would be. I think the last time that Georgia tore down the goalpost was back in 2000, beating Tennessee between the hedges, because I think Georgia had lost like 10 straight to Tennessee at that point. And so, yeah, I think I was trying to go back just period, like the biggest games ever in Sanford Stadium history. Like, I mean, the blackout in 2008 that Georgia fans don't want to remember versus Alabama. I think Georgia was number 3 or 4. Alabama was number like 7 or 8. And I think the game where Kevin Butler, either 1981, 1982 versus Clemson, hit that like 60-yarder to win it. I want to say that was a top 5 matchup, and you're talking early 80s at that point. So in my lifetime of being a fan, I can't ever remember a top 3 matchup in Sanford Stadium with Georgia being number 1 or Georgia being number 3. Like, I don't know. You'd have to go back to maybe LSU 2004 was a pretty highly ranked game the year after they lost the won the national championship. But yeah, I'd have to go back and look. Well, I got a few weeks, so do some research on that for you. But yeah, it'll be the biggest game in Sanford Stadium that I can remember. And I just want Georgia fans to get off of Twitter. I was on the side of the game time conversation when it came to the Atlanta Braves. I thought the Atlanta Braves got absolutely hosed. Home field advantage in the NLDS, and they get 2 afternoon weekday games, while the Phillies over here getting 4:30 on a Friday. That's basically a week. You get an early weekend start at 4:30 on a Friday, and then a Saturday grinds my gears. So I was on board with that argument. But I'm seeing Georgia fans like, oh, if this Tennessee game isn't a night game, it'll just be a travesty. Blah blah blah. We don't get any night games like so. And I did see some stats that Georgia apparently since 2005 has gotten like way less night games than any other program in the SEC. Like it was like LSU had the most. I want to say with like 58 since 2000 in conference play. And then the second least was Florida with like 33, and Georgia had 16. So that was like a huge number. But I digress. November 5th, 3:30 slot, like that's like the greatest college football like slot ever. Like that, it's you don't have to wait all day for it. It starts in the afternoon. By halftime, it's a night game. Like it's the greatest. Like I don't know why why we're besmirching the 3:30 CBS slot all of a sudden. Like I feel like that is college football prime time. So it's always nice to get more night games, but this one specifically, like no, I don't want to wait around all day. 3:30 is perfect. That's why I've always loved the Georgia Florida game. How it's like it's always second half is always a night game. It's just around late October, November is when it starts to look like that.
I mean, I don't even want to guess what the tickets are going to go for UGA, Tennessee. But I think about it and I'm like, is there a path to this being a number 1 versus number 2 matchup, Matt Green? There is, because Ohio State, do you know where they go in just a couple weeks, sir?
They go Penn State?
They do go to Penn State on October 29th. We know the Buckeyes in Happy Valley have had some problems there. The Nittany Lions a little beat up, a little bruised after getting run all over by Michigan on Saturday, so we'll get into that in a second. But there's a possibility. I would circle that one because there is a distinct possibility Georgia and Tennessee are 1-2 in the AP poll. Not to jinx it. Let me knock on some wood here. But when we talk about just one of the biggest SEC games of all time, I think this game has it all. The amount of big-time recruits that will be on the field for this one, too. I mean, goodness gracious. I really can't fathom. We talked about Bama and Tennessee and what that was and how big it was for this program. I mean, Tennessee, Georgia might be bigger. I think beating Alabama meant more and will mean more for Tennessee fans just because of just the long rivalry with with Alabama and just the dominance of 15 years and what they've done to the sport, and just getting over the Saban hump was just monumental. So I think Alabama will mean more this year. Even if you had to pick between which game, like if Tennessee won either one, which one would mean more to fans? I think winning, especially at Neyland, like it's just different when you carry the goalposts out of the building, and it's just this whole fan experience that would not be the case.
Smoking stogies.
Yeah, like it's just a different experience altogether. But I don't know. I'm very, very much excited because I think there's a strong possibility that is the case. But you should be excited, Matt Green. The rest of the way, if you're a Dog fan, I think you've got to be pumped because you don't have to just mail in your Saturdays anymore. So if you're a Dog fan and have anything else planned for the rest of this college football season, you planned wrong because you should have looked at the calendar before the year and you were like, honey, we got to do whatever you want to do with the kids, with vacation, weddings, whatever you got to do. Up until the end of October, I'm open. Like, we can figure stuff out. Like, we're going to be all right. But after October, what is it, October 29th and onward?
Yeah.
We're booked because you got Florida, you got Kentucky, you got Mississippi State, and you got Tennessee over a month stretch, man. Like that is some big time action with Mississippi State and Kentucky both being on the road. So fun time for Georgia fans because I think they've been kind of bored. Not to speak for everybody, but it seems like the people I've talked to on Twitter are pretty bored with the current state of affairs for the Dogs.
Yeah, they have had a lot of just opponents that you knew they were going to dominate before the game started. But looking back at the Georgia-Tennessee rivalry, you got to go back to 2005 is the last time it was a top 10 matchup. That was in Knoxville. Georgia was number 5, Tennessee was number 8. DJ Shockley, Thomas Flowers had the big punt return. I remember at the for a touchdown in that one. But
then they ever been 1-2? I would doubt it.
And then
right?
you go back to 98. Georgia was number 7 and Tennessee was number 4. That was actually in Athens, and Tennessee won 22-3. So yeah, I mean, you go. Those are really like the only two top 10 matchups between both. Like there's a 3-11 one year, but yeah, 3-14 back in 2020. Tennessee got up to 14 with that Jarrett Guarantano team somehow. But yeah, so it's exciting couple weeks coming up. I would never in my lifetime as a Georgia fan think that the Florida game could be a trap game that you overlook ahead of the Tennessee game. So with just all the fanfare that goes into the Florida game and just what that rivalry means to Georgia and specifically Kirby Smart, like it feels like Steve Spurrier, like because of his college career, like really cared about that Georgia game, like more than anybody. Like it's even when he was at South Carolina, it seemed like Steve Spurrier just legitimately hated Georgia. I feel like Kirby Smart seems to have that same like feel of like he feels exactly the way the fan base does about Florida. So I don't think there's a chance Georgia can overlook it.
And I don't think they will. I don't think it's the case. But also, every Tennessee fan is going to be rooting hardcore for the Dogs in the Florida game because we both know that the Dogs are not losing back-to-back to Florida and Tennessee this year. So Georgia will be there will be a lot of orange cheering for the red and black in a couple weeks.
And so Kentucky, is that in Knoxville?
That is in Knoxville. Okay. Under the lights, it looks like. It's going to be dark mode. I think Tennessee's wearing black that night for spooky season.
Spooky season.
Yeah,
gotcha.
It's right for Halloween, 29th. I think that might be the thing going forward. And you will appreciate this, Matt Green. So it seems like, I think it was Austin Price, VolQuest on Twitter, who mentioned this, where I think there's like some sort of understanding that Tennessee's going to wear the orange and white in the classics for the rivalry games. So whether it's Florida or Bama, I don't know who else that would probably, maybe Vanderbilt, I guess. They'll be wearing the traditional uniforms. Like those are locked in. And then they'll pull out the smoky grays for like a Mizzou or something in the black uniforms against South Carolina's or the Kentuckys of the world, because those aren't real rivals, considering that South Carolina, I don't know if you saw today, the number 1 player in the state just committed to the Tennessee Volunteers, the 2024 class. Hate to see it.
Taking it hard.
Hate to see it. But, Shane Beamer, co-coach of the year of 2021 in the SEC with Mr. Josh Heupel. That banner will fly forever. Matt Green, your green line stat of the weekend is what, my friend?
My green line stat of the week. You may have caught this one on, I'm not sure if it was on the broadcast, but I heard this somewhere. The last time that Alabama allowed 50-plus points. Do you know when that was, sir?
I don't think Saban's ever given it up, right?
It was 1907 to Sewanee, University of the South. Dropped a 50 burger on the Crimson Tide that day. And then you go back, the last time Nick Saban team allowed 50-plus points. You got to go back to 1996. The number 1 ranked Cornhuskers absolutely dominated the Michigan State Spartans. And then the most that an Alabama Saban team has given up, it was 45 in the Sugar Bowl to Oklahoma, the 2014 Sugar Bowl, but 2013 season. And then 44 in the national title game a couple years ago to Trevor Lawrence and Clemson. So most a Alabama Saban team has given up ever. 52-49 Volunteers.
What did I say on the podcast over the weekend? I just want to look. I'm not one to do victory laps, but I have said all summer leading into this year, offense, 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 and that if Tennessee's offense was in the top 10 again in points per game, I didn't see a path for them not winning 10 games this year. They were the only Power 5 team not to do it a year ago. This offense is even better. They're not an air raid. Some people still throw that out there. They ran all over Alabama. Jabari Small, Hendon Hooker, Jalen Wright's averaging 6 yards to carry. He's a pain in the butt to take down. That man is a yards after contact machine. He is. There's a reason he was on the Bruce Feldman freaks list this summer. Is he's just a machine and going to be a really good player for the Vols going forward. But man, Saban 52 points and Tennessee. It felt like they could have scored more. And when they got up 28-10 in this game, I told my wife, I was like, I think this might be over. And I was texting you where I'm like, because here it's a math game. Well, it's a math game with Tennessee. Like Alabama, Bryce Young was just, and we'll get into all of this. I just looked at it. I'm like, you're looking at 4 straight possessions of stopping Tennessee's offense. Like it's just so hard to get enough stops to beat Tennessee now. And this is a Tennessee team that still is missing a lot of pieces. This is without Cedric Tillman, their number 1 player for the last 3 weeks. They've beaten LSU and Florida and Alabama without Cedric Tillman. I think if you told us before the year that Tillman would be out for all those games and they would just be fine, you would not think twice about his absence. I mean, it's too good. They're too good across the board on offense to slow down, and it's just a pain in the butt to deal with this team. And you're gonna have to score 40. You're gonna have to score 45 maybe to beat Tennessee.
But Alabama's like the only team that like the big deficit early just doesn't matter. It's like they were up 28-10, and like anyone else, it's like they're going to come out and throw a pick next possession. Maybe they throw a pick 6 right here. Game's over. Like they start to self-destruct or something. Like Alabama, it's like they didn't even change anything. They just came right down the field, made it 28-17. And they did get a couple stops in a row and made it 28-24 at the half. It was like it felt like this game Tennessee had dominated for 2 quarters, and it's a 28-24 ball game. You're just like, God, like I'm not sure how much better Tennessee can play in the second half. And then I think we saw this Alabama, like, because that's what I feel like there's kind of a misconception here. Like, this game kind of went exactly how it should have gone. Like, with how Alabama has played this season, like, it's only, like, we only had a 1-quarter sample size of the Quinn Ewers thing. It's like we don't want to make it too big of a deal of it. But they were getting exposed by a quarterback that could actually throw the ball around. You saw it against Texas A&M, just how it just didn't look like a typical Alabama team. Like they typically dominate opponents like that. And then also the dumb mistakes early on with the punt return. Like I don't know what that guy is thinking. I'm not sure I've ever seen Nick Saban get that mad in a game before. Like, because he literally said exactly what I said in my living room. Like, what are you doing? And it goes to Nick Saban. What are you doing? What the F are you doing? So it's an uncharacteristic Alabama team. They're the most penalized team in the country. I think they're number 1. And they just, with how Tennessee had played this year and how Alabama had played this year, like, I think Tennessee has looked better. And so you saw them line it up in Knoxville. Definitely a 3 to 7 point swing right there, just playing in Knoxville. And this was kind of expected, like for Alabama to just be a 7-point favorite, like that's almost a pick 'em in Vegas world, you know. It's just because they're just always favored by so much. So I feel like I wasn't that surprised while I was watching. I've had questions of Alabama's secondary all year, and then you just saw the guys running wide open. It's like that's what Tennessee's done all year. So it was kind of par for the course of what we've seen so far.
Absolutely. What we've seen so far. Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought this was interesting from Chris Lowe of ESPN, who said Bama, or the team that beat Bama in the CFP era, has gone on to win the national title every single time in the last 8 years. So a lot of people were like, oh, but what about Texas A&M? It's like, well, no, Georgia beat Alabama in the national title. That's how that worked. You basically have to beat Alabama, or Alabama just wins the national title in the modern thing. So Tennessee's in some rare company now because they slayed the dragon. And like you said, the difference in circumstances between last year's A&M team and that win versus Tennessee, it's like Tennessee was on the rise and unscathed, undefeated. The offense is cooking. None of that was the case for A&M. And no one believed in A&M after the game. You didn't come out of it going, wow, Zach Calzada and the Aggies, they figured it out. This is a championship team in waiting. No.
I mean, I'm sure we all thought that. You're like, oh, yeah, okay, this is the Texas A&M. This is what we expected to see this year. And then it's like, no, that was the outlier.
I don't know. I think if we played the tapes back, we were pretty dubious of Zach Calzada being the guy based on what we saw before that, where it's like he may have just had the game of his life. And that's what it seems like was the case. And
he was more Steven Garcia than Hendon Hooker.
Oof, rough comparison. He was a gamer, man. Steven Garcia was a lot of fun, and I'm sure a lot of Gamecock fans long for the days of Steven Garcia and the old ball coach up there in Columbia. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting. So I'm not saying Tennessee's going to win the title, but there are some parallels between 2019 LSU and these Volunteers. There are some, and a lot of people are like, oh, the defense. And you go through it. LSU was 32nd, I want to say, in scoring defense the year they won the national title. And I seem to recall a lot of pieces when LSU was running the gauntlet was they can't stop anybody. That's eventually going to come back to bite them, is they can't stop anybody. Their defense sucks. They can't win the national title. I don't care how good Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and company are. You can't win a title without defense. The LSU Tigers proceeded to win the national title with no defense. And I think
that defense did improve as the year went on, though.
And Tennessee's has improved. You cannot run. I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was sensational in this game. He had one move on an RPO that left Christian Charles in the dust, and it was just sick. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs is a player. Bryce Young was unbelievable and just a gamer. He took some shots, and I kept looking over my wife, and I'm like, I really can't believe he's still in this game. I don't know what kind of what kind of medicine he's on or how much he's icing it on the sidelines, and the dude is a warrior for him to deal with what he's dealing with and to keep getting back up, because he was taking some shots. The Omari Thomas shot was brutal, but no, like Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs were amazing. And I mean, Tennessee, Jeremy Banks got a lot of pressure. Tennessee sends pressure, and I think that's part of what they've learned, is that the depth isn't going to be here on the back four. Like, it doesn't matter who's back there. You're going to have some problems. So you need to be blitzing. You need to be stunning. You need to be throwing 4 to 5 guys over and over and over again, because they'll get home eventually. But that's another part of this. Byron Young, who has been a superstar edge guy all season long, he was the lowest graded edge pass rusher in this game for Tennessee. Lowest one. Was awful. He never got home once, and he's a sensational, great player. You know who's number 2? Tyler Barron, who's on the other side, who's been great. Like, they got no pressure from the guys they needed to get pressure from, and it didn't matter. Tennessee is winning in different ways that I think is impressive, where they don't give up the big one. Like, Alabama never got the Jamison Williams, John Mechie type deep shots. That's the biggest difference with Alabama this year, is, from my perspective, is that Bryce is still unbelievable. Jahmyr Gibbs is an all-time great Alabama back, but they don't have the Jamison Williams. They don't have the Julio Jones. They don't have the Amari Cooper. None of those guys. Prentice, Holden, doesn't matter who it is. Like, their favorite target is the tight end. Like, that's their most reliable target, and he was great in this one. But, I mean, that's a problem. That is a significant problem, that they don't have anybody out wide that really scared Tennessee, and they didn't have the big plays. Like, Jalin Hyatt, obviously, with his 5 touchdowns, 6 catches, was unbelievable in a multitude of ways. But, like, Tennessee has those kind of Alabama receivers of the past. That's something that I just kind of thought was funny, was that Tennessee now has the Jamison Williams, John Mechie's.
I don't know about all that. We're talking Alabama receivers. We're talking like what, eight 10 first round picks in the last like 8 years or so.
I'm not saying overall. I'm saying just this particular year, and I think there is a path for Jalin Hyatt. We're going to see where he gets drafted. I mean, his stock is sky high. Cedric Tillman was already in that second, third round tier. I mean, if he's back and healthy and playing at a high level, like he could sneak into the first round. Like there are guys now, Brew McCoy, who has been fantastic all season long. There's a path for him because of his size and like. All I'm saying is this particular unit, this 3-man group, has more of those game breakers that Alabama has always had. The people that scare you. Like I'm sure that's what Jalin Hyatt scares the hell out of every team they're playing because he's too fast.
Without a doubt. And that's what we've talked about like all year, that Alabama, and that's what a lot of Georgia fans talked about with Jermaine Burton. Like they're thinking Jermaine Burton's going to come in there and be Jamison Williams. And they're in for a rude awakening. Like he's not that guy. I thought he was
for this game.
Yeah, seriously. I think he had 2 catches. I think he had a long one in this. So I think he had like 2 for like 45 or something. He had 1 long catch. But you just... with the receivers, for one, aren't the typical Alabama just game breakers. The offensive line isn't just the typical dominant force. The secondary is a question. There's just a lot of holes on this team that I think the just individual brilliance of Bryce Young and maybe even Will Anderson to an extent were kind of disguising on this team. So with Bryce Young was running for his life in this game, but the guy is just a baller and he just runs around and makes plays and finds the open man. And you just see there's just the uncharacteristic drop. Just there was like a 3rd and 12 at one point that Trayshawn Holden was like wide open for like 10 yards right across the middle, and he just drops it. And it's like Alabama receivers just don't do that. They don't ever give up the easy play, you know. So it's a weird thing. And Jahmyr Gibbs is, like you said, he's one of the best running backs I've ever seen play at Alabama, honestly. Like he's incredible, and I thought his individual brilliance, and it almost was enough to win this game versus Tennessee. But this whole Alabama offense is Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs. Like there's no one you're afraid of at receiver. As good as Latu is, like he's just a tight end. Like he's a good tight end, but he's not even. Exactly. He's not like a tight end that's good enough to replace some receiver production. Like he's just a solid safety valve that's like going to be I could see being a good tight end in the NFL, but not a guy you can just feed 8 to 10 times or anything like that. But this offense just isn't, and they still scored 49 points. So like they were doing a lot against this Tennessee defense, but I think this Tennessee and the time of possession is just insane in this game. Just all of the big plays that Tennessee was able to make. It just all of the weaknesses that Alabama had shown, all the cracks that they had shown in the first 5-6 weeks of the season. I think Tennessee just exposed it, and they're the best team they've played by far this year, and it showed.
Yeah, I mean It's huge. It's a monumental win for this program, for Josh Heupel. That we should also mention 1 sack given up by the Tennessee offensive line was incredible against Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. I think that cannot be understated, is that Crawford filling in at left tackle. The Tennessee offensive line was unbelievable. So they deserve all the praise in the world for what they're able to do. I was just amazed, too, and this is the last thing we'll say on it, is that, like, I thought the fumble was it. I thought that was just one of those, the backbreaker where you finally made the Alabama mistake that you just can't do, but it always seems to happen for all the big teams in games against Alabama. And it didn't.
And that's the difference. It's like there's a difference now. It's like they get a lot of penalties now. It was the same with the national championship with Georgia. That's what every single Georgia fan felt on that Stetson Bennett intentional grounding fumble. Is like, this is it. This is going to be the fourth quarter mistake that Alabama wins this thing on. But yeah, it was just a huge win for Tennessee. I can't imagine. I can't imagine how you're feeling today. Also, shout out to whoever made Tennessee's schedule. You had the Florida game, which was just game day. Get that monkey off your back. Follow it up with a bye week. So, you can just celebrate for like 2 weeks. You don't have to worry about getting back up the next week. And then busting another drought with Alabama and following it up with UT Martin, don't have to worry about getting back up the second week again. So Tennessee fans can celebrate this one for about 2 weeks, and I'm sure they will.
Absolutely. Next up, Michigan played Penn State and blew them out in the second quarter, or in the second half. Matt Green, I ask you, why are teams still confronting the Michigan Wolverines at halftime? Because the results have been horrific for the team that goes at the Michigan Wolverines when they're coming out of the tunnel in the second half in the big house. Ohio State did it, and we know what happened there in the second half. Penn State did it on Saturday afternoon. Michigan proceeds to beat the crap out of the Nittany Lions. They ran all over Penn State in this one, who had a top 10 rush defense coming into this. Drew Aller got some run because Sean Clifford really wasn't able to do anything through the air against Michigan. I mean, 4 TDs in the ground, 418 yards. Edwards and Blake Corrum were unbelievable across the board. But my thing, when Michigan fans complaining about the University of Tennessee hopping the Michigan Wolverines at number 3, and they're like, oh, how are we not number 3? McCarthy, 1 interception, no TD passes, 6.0 yards per attempt. He had a pick 6 in this one. I don't know. There's something about the Michigan passing offense that I think is their weakness. We didn't learn. Penn State wasn't able to capitalize on that, but Michigan is an unbelievable running team. They have an unbelievable duo of backs. I mean, Corrum being the star there. I don't know. I think my main takeaway is Michigan's great. Defense is great. The running backs are great. J.J. McCarthy, are we sure he's great? That's my take. What about you, sir?
Well, yeah, but I mean, when you're splitting hairs of what their rankings should be, you can't necessarily, break it down to that level. Like, regardless of their style, like they just beat the hell out of Penn State. So Michigan, I think Tennessee had the best win of the weekend, but Michigan was almost the most impressive team, just because, like, they've been so good so far through this season, but we're still questioning on how good they were. And for Penn State, and honestly, Penn State made 2 good plays in the first half of this game, and it was 16-14. Like, Clifford had the 60-yard run down to inside the 5, and then they had the kind of fluky pick 6. It's like, without those 2 plays, like, Michigan is beating them even worse than the score line actually looked. So Michigan was very impressive in this game. I'm definitely going to vote Tennessee ahead of them if I'm making a ranking. It's like, these people that get mad about rankings like this in week 7, week 8, it's like, come on. This will all work itself out. Like, don't even worry about it. But yeah, I was really impressed by Michigan. J.J. McCarthy wasn't great in this one, but he's completing almost 80% of his passes this year. 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. Like, I'm getting shades of 2018 Clemson with this team a little bit. Just because of, obviously, it's not being done the same way. This is a much more run dominant team. But with 2017 Clemson, we all know about Kelly Bryant. He came back the next year, and what happened in the playoff, it just made it very obvious you can't win a national championship with Kelly Bryant at quarterback. And so the next year, Trevor Lawrence comes in. He ends up getting the job 2 or 3 games into the season. This is basically exactly what Michigan did. They went to the playoff, got absolutely blasted, and you could see very clearly that McNamara just wasn't the guy that could get it done. I think this is exactly what every Michigan fan, like armchair quarterback, wanted. Like, because every fan thinks, why do we have this basic quarterback in? Bring in the 5-star talent. Like, I don't care if he's inexperienced. I want to see the 5-star. And this is exactly what they wanted. It's basically the exact same team they were last year. Like, without Haskins, I mean, Donovan Edwards has just picked up right where Haskins left off, or maybe Blake Corrum picked off where Haskins was, and now Edwards is the number 2 to him. But it's basically the exact same team, and now you have a quarterback that's dynamic that can actually make some plays, especially with his legs. So I think this Michigan team, just got a lot more dangerous in my mind after watching this game versus Penn State.
Next up, Texas. They survive against Iowa State at home. Someone made the joke on Twitter that I thought was funny. I don't know if I sent that to you on Saturday, but like Matt Candle underperforming in games that no one's watching, and then overperforming in the game that everybody's watching. So it was just a classic Matt Campbell thing. And look, I mean, Iowa State, they fall to 0-4 in the Big 12. Rough season, but we thought coming into this year was going to be a rebuilding year with Purdy and Breece Hall and company being gone. Hunter Deckers has been better, I think, than anticipated right out of the gate for the Clones, but they're 0-4 in the conference. Ewers throws 3 TDs, no picks, not a big yards per attempt. Bijan Robinson runs for over 100, 5 yards to carry. They do just enough. Like, this was just a good home win against a team that gets up for its competition, and I think Texas deserves credit for taking care of business here following a big win over Oklahoma the previous week, not falling right on their face after such a monumental win for their program. And I don't know, I didn't have a strong takeaway outside of Texas is acting like a top 10 team should when they're healthy with Ewers and company. What'd you think?
See, I took the opposite. I took the Texas is not back, and they just need to slow their roll. Like, Bijan Robinson, I will say, get a lot of Saquon Barkley vibes from Bijan Robinson. Like, the way this guy catches the ball, it's just like, as a running back, he's a baller. But Iowa State really shot themselves in the foot in this game. Like, early in the first half, they're about to go up 14. They could have gone up 14-0, throw the pick in the end zone. Then they're driving late in this one, down 3, have the ball inside the 30 when the quarterback fumbles. Like, Texas is really lucky to get out of this one alive. Like, they're talking about playoff. Like, we lost to Bama, and that one loss is without Ewers. Like, this team could be a playoff team. Like, just slow your roll. Like, just try to take care of business, get in the Big 12 championship. Maybe getting a New Year's Six bowl. Like, you guys aren't ready for the playoff. Like, this was a noon game that I feel like these teams that aren't the typical top 10 teams, they can kind of sleepwalk through these games. They had the big win. They got up for Oklahoma. Now they're playing what was Iowa State coming to this one, like 2-3 or something. Mm-hmm. You got the noon kickoff, and they didn't come ready to play. Like, they did not look that good for the first 2 quarters of this game. But like you said, they still found a way to get it done and pulled out the victory. So that's all that matters. But let's cool the Texas playoff talk. Like, this is a fine team, but this isn't a playoff team. Not yet. Not in 2022.
Interesting. It is also fascinating that they're only. Oh wait, never mind. That's a different one. Split. Never mind. We'll see. I think. Ewers is just getting better and better as the year goes on. And like you said, Bijan Robinson's a special player. So we'll see where Texas ends up by the end of the year because they have some big games still ahead.
Without a doubt. TCU, Oklahoma State, there's going to be some good ones.
Next up, we had Illinois versus Minnesota. Minnesota, that was a big hit for you.
Home dog of the week, sir.
Was that Zeus's home dog? So is he back to 500 or is he one game under 500?
It's interesting you should say because I decided to be nice to Zeus this week, and he actually called 2 home dogs of the week, and so we're going to give him 2 wins this week. So Illinois and Kentucky, both home dogs of the week. Zeus called those one outright, so that gets him up to 4-4 here, even though he only in 7 weeks.
My lock of the week: Kentucky Wildcats over the Bulldogs. We'll get into that one in a second. So shout out to Zeus, bouncing back here in the middle of October. We're a good friend of the program, Mr. Zeus. Hope that ACL continues to heal up. Right. Chase Brown, 41 carries for 180 yards in the victory over the Minnesota Golden Gophers. Mohamed Ibrahim was back for this one. He also ran all over Illinois, but not enough because we'll get into a stat that is so preposterous to me in modern college football that you have to hear it to believe it.
Hit me with it.
Well, hold on. Any NFL team that is thinking about drafting Chase Brown, just go ahead and move on from that one. 41 carries in a college football game. yeah, that hard pass for any NFL team. Like,
you remember Jonathan Taylor? Jonathan Taylor was getting some 35, 40 carry games in his Wisconsin time. I think you just feed the rock.
Maybe you do.
Some guys are workhorses.
Well, you definitely do in Illinois because they are now 6-1, I believe, on the year, and just an unreal start for the Fighting Illini. One of the best starts in program history. But Tanner Morgan, his line in this one, 4 for 12, 21 yards, 1.8 yards per attempt, and an interception. I mean, you're not going to win many football games with those kind of lines, sir. And you know what's crazy coming out of this one, Matt Green? You know what's crazy? Minnesota is still number 4 in scoring defense in the country. They've given up 7 touchdowns total, and they have 3 losses. 3 losses and only given up 7 touchdowns. Like, number 1, do you know who's actually tied at number 1 with the Fighting Illini?
In scoring defense?
Mm-hmm.
I imagine George is up there, right? It is
the Georgia Bulldogs with 5 TDs as well.
Because I think they were at 10 a game, I think, coming into the Vanderbilt game. So now
they're at 9.1 now, and Illinois is at
Okay.
8.9. But in terms of actual just TDs, the only difference is Georgia's given up 1 more field goal than Illinois.
Gotcha.
So virtually the same, but huge for the Illinois Fighting Illini. What did you make of this one, Matt Green?
I feel like this was the kind of game, it feels like this is who Brett Bielema is as a coach. And I think a good coach, the way I always kind of interpret a good coach is the team is a reflection of who he is as a coach. And every year, Brett Bielema's team is the type of team that he wants to have. So it's like he wants to bully you in the running game, and he's got a workhorse running back that does that. So yeah, I've liked how this Illinois team's looked. Like you said everything about their defense this year. Circle that November 12th matchup with Purdue. That could decide the Big Ten West. Illinois and Purdue. I don't think many people were picking that in the preseason.
But yet here we are.
Also, do you know who's in third in the Big Ten West right now? I'll give you like 5 guesses, honestly. There's
5?
only 7 teams over there.
I was going to say, well, first off, I'll bite. Who's in the Big Ten West? It's got to be Nebraska, right?
Nebraska is in third place, and I think you just Googled it over there. You know, I'm not.
In what,
I'm not
2 seconds?
But yeah, like it's insane. Minnesota was creating some buzz. We've seen them lose a couple games. Wisconsin, Iowa, the typical teams at the top of the Big Ten West are down. Nebraska fires their coach, and somehow they're actually 2-2 to begin conference play. So, yeah, wild world the Big Ten West has become.
Next up, we had the TCU Horned Frogs survive late against Oklahoma State at home. Per TCU, this is the first time in history the Horned Frogs have defeated a top 25 opponent in 3 consecutive games. I mean, TCU held Oklahoma State to 32 yards of total offense in the fourth quarter to come back and win here. Just a fantastic game. So, and I'll give you another crazy stat. So this combines Utah, because I don't want to forget this later on. From Dean Straka on Twitter, Utah and TCU led for a collective 48 seconds in regulation on Saturday, and they both won. Bonkers. The TCU Horned Frogs. You can't kill them.
No, I think that's characteristics of Horned Frogs in general. No, I know nothing about Horned Frogs.
Don't they spit?
But yeah, they actually, I guess I do know something about Horned Frogs. They shoot blood through their eyes, and that's how they I don't know how they paralyze their prey or something. I don't know. But so I do know a little bit about Horned Frogs. That's why the TCU does a little red sometimes, like they did in this one. They had some red on the uniform and everything. But yeah, Max Duggan, once again, a good performance. And TCU is just so balanced. I think that's what so many people forget when they talk about offense. So many people think offense, passing the ball. Like, no, offense is scoring points. And however you score points to do it is a good offense. So they're always so balanced, running and passing the ball. Max Duggan, one of the only guys in the country with more touchdowns than Hendon Hooker and only one interception on the season. 16 touchdowns and 1 pick so far this year. I think Hooker's at 15-1. And then who are the other two? Caleb Williams and Grayson McCall are both up there. Like, I think Caleb Williams is like 18-1 now. But yeah, Max Duggan, this TCU team, they just keep on winning, man. And especially early on, I thought, okay, maybe it was a good story for a few weeks. Oklahoma State was up 24-7 in this one. I kind of wrote them off, but they came right back and won this thing. So big time win for the Horned Frogs. First undefeated start since 2017.
Are they your Big 12 favorite, or do you think it's Oklahoma State or Texas or Kansas State, really?
Oh, it's hard to say. My Baylor Bears just keep getting worse and worse by the week. Lost to West Virginia. Was that on Friday? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so TCU right now looks like the best team. I mean, you can't really say Oklahoma State's better other than, I guess, home win in overtime means maybe Oklahoma State wins on a neutral site. But, yeah, that Texas TCU, when do we get that one?
Isn't that the last game of the year?
November 12th. So there's another one. What did I just say? It was November 12th.
November 12th. Oh, yeah, they got Baylor
Purdue
last. Yeah.
So, yeah, Texas and TCU, I mean, that's going to be a big one. Texas, like, they've had so many marquee games so far earlier in the season. It's kind of crazy how many they still have left. So, the Big 12 is just so fun.
Well, the Horns go at Oklahoma State next week. Going to be a huge game.
Okay, so that one's next week.
Yeah. Then you go to Kansas State, TCU at home, at Kansas, and then Baylor at home to finish. I mean, all 5 games are toss-up games for them down the stretch. Very, 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 very fascinating to see what Texas made up. We're going to learn a lot about the Longhorns over the next month.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Next up, a team that I thought we had a good handle on, but maybe not. The Arkansas Razorbacks. They have a fantastic one in this game. KJ Jefferson, 29-40, 399 total yards, 5 TDs. He's back. Just an all-time great performance from Mr. KJ Jefferson. But, BYU was in shambles on their message boards and reading different stuff. I was going into it, and look.
Did they expect to win this one?
Yeah, I picked BYU. I mean, this was in Provo. This was right smack
dab. That was a foolish pick, clearly.
Well, I mean, it was bold for.
We'll have to get to our recap. We can get. Once we get to I'll give the audience our results from this.
Yeah,
weekend.
I know. We were moving on the Tennessee thing, and I was like, we'll end it with it.
Yeah, for sure.
But BYU, awesome uniforms. Like, whoever's doing the BYU uniforms week over week, I think they might have the best uniform.
You like the helmet thing? Yeah. The cougar in the helmet?
Top notch. And they had the black last week, the blue, everything about BYU. The look, I'm bummed that the Vols are not going to Provo next year, because I would absolutely be going to see Tennessee at BYU to open.
Yeah, I wish Tennessee wasn't afraid to go to Provo as well, but here we are. Arkansas is one of those teams. No, Arkansas is one of those teams. Like we said, they're just a completely different team with their quarterback, and KJ Jefferson just is this entire offense. And they looked how we expect them to look again this week. Defense still giving up a lot of points, and that's probably going to continue to be a problem moving forward. A lot of yards through the air, but yeah, this Arkansas team. I expected them to go on the road. They're just better than BYU, but, I mean, there could still be a couple more losses on this schedule. Where are they right now? Are they just 2 losses?
I think
they have 3.
Oh, do they have 3?
They had lost 3 in a row, I think, actually, now that I think about it.
And
they had lost 3 in a row.
Mississippi State?
So they're at 4-3. Yeah, that's right.
Well, this was from BYU, so I was reading different pieces on this. And BYU on 247 wrote this, quote, against Arkansas, the BYU defense gave up 52 points at home. They allowed conversions on 12 of 15 Arkansas third downs, 15 chances to get off the field, and the BYU defense only took advantage of 3 of them. One of those resulted in a punt, one in a field goal for Arkansas, and the other happened in the waning seconds of the game, and Arkansas was stopped on the 2-inch line with less than 30 seconds left. I mean, BYU defense, huge problem for the Cougars this year, which I did not anticipate for Kalani Sitake's group. So I wonder if they're going to have some staff changes this offseason for the Cougars, because they're moving to the Big 12 next year, and it's going to be a highly, highly competitive conference. And I mean, you have UCF over here. Defense you first over 70-13 over Temple, and they have a top 5 scoring defense. So, Big 12, a lot of good defenses to go along with their good offense as well.
Yeah, I'm disappointed. Like, it's going to be a fun conference moving forward, but it is disappointing to have so many of these conference realignment things on the on deck circle. I don't know, for lack of a better term. Because this has been like one of the more fun years I can remember in college football. I mean, last year was a lot of unpredictability, but there seems to be a lot of legit contenders in every conference right now, and the Big 12 is just going to look entirely different. But I guess a lot of those teams are still going to be in the Big 12, because Oklahoma and Texas haven't even been the best teams in the conference.
That's fair. I hope we at least just get one. All my hope is that we get Texas and Oklahoma with those 4 in the conference for 1 year. Like, at least give me net 2023. That's all I want. Just give me the one and see what this looks like, because it's going to be a bloodbath next year across the board. So I'm curious. Syracuse stays undefeated. They take care of a Devin Leary-less Wolfpack. From also Nate Mink on Twitter, he said that this was an amazing stat. The last time Syracuse was 6-0 and faced another 6-0 team, this being Clemson this weekend, or better, came at 7-0 Penn State in 1959. That same year. Do you know what happened with those Syracuse Orangemen?
Did they win it all?
They won the national championship.
Oh,
my
wow.
friend. So we're not saying book your tickets, Orangemen fans, but we're also not saying don't book those college football playoff tickets, because, look, Garrett Schrader, Robert Anai, Dino Babers, Sean Tucker, the group is just unstoppable. It's going to be an orange off this weekend against Clemson, but, man, big win for the Orangemen. What did you make of this one, sir?
Yeah, Devin Leary-less Wolfpack is just a pretty bad team. This NC State team did not look very good. Obviously, credit to Syracuse for the role they played in NC State not looking good. But yeah, Syracuse, you have to start to take this team seriously. I mean, they're 6-0. Like you said, this offense, Garrett Schrader, it's looked really good. So keep it rolling for the Qs.
Keep it rolling. Next up, Jaden Daniels balling out for the LSU Tigers. They go on the road in the swamp and take care of the Florida Gators once again. Big win for LSU. No shoe throwing in this one, but that did not need to happen for the Tigers to run away with this one. I mean, LSU scored touchdowns on its first 6 offensive possessions. You're not going to win many football games when that's the case. So the Gators, man, they are another one to watch, where it's like the rise of Tennessee and Georgia. That puts the Florida Gators in a precarious spot in the SEC East for the next couple of years. What did you make of this one, sir?
Yeah, I mean, you really got to go back to like the Ron Zook years to really the only years that Florida has really been the number 3 team behind Georgia and Tennessee. But yeah, this was just a shootout. This was a fun one to watch for a while. Jaden Daniels looked good. Some of the worst tackling I've ever seen. Like, shout out to Anthony Richardson in his athleticism. But that, like, what was like a 70-yard run he had? Like, it was, or his 81-yard run. it was the worst tackling I've ever seen, and didn't seem like any of the people and any of the guys in LSU secondary had any interest in tackling him. But yeah, this is it's a first year for both of these guys, but for Billy Napier, this is first year, and like I said, going into this game, like if they pulled this out, 5-2 going into the cocktail party was about as good as you could have asked for. So that being said, 4-3 going into the cocktail party is about what you probably should have expected, on the good side of what you should expect, because they did beat Utah, and they did take Tennessee to the brink as well. So it's about all you can expect for Florida. The only thing is, for this being year one, like this has been such a generous schedule. Getting Utah at home, getting Kentucky at home, getting LSU at home. Like to have like a year two where you see a lot of teams get like that breakthrough year, like you see Tennessee with Heupel right now in year two. You see a lot of teams take a huge step in year two. Like the schedule isn't going to be quite as kind next year. So I don't know. Florida still got Georgia. They still got they got to go at Texas A&M. I mean, they still have South Carolina and Florida State. So how many games is Florida losing the rest of the way? Of those, what did I say? 5 games? Yeah, they're 4-3 at this point. What of those 5 games? You got Vanderbilt, so we'll give you 6. So of those 5 of Georgia, A&M, South Carolina, and Florida State, how many of those games did they win in?
I think they're going to fight for bowl eligibility, Matt Green.
So they only need one of those to win a bowl, to get to a bowl, because the Vanderbilt win will put them at 5.
I mean, Vanderbilt, like, I think, okay, here's the thing. I don't think they're going to be favored at Florida State. I don't think they're going to be favored at A&M. I definitely don't think they're going to be favored at at Georgia in the cocktail party. I think it comes down to the South Carolina game, because I don't think they're going to win at A&M. So, and I don't think they're going to win at Florida State based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks.
A&M isn't necessarily – you just have no idea what that team is week in and week out, but it is on the road.
I mean, they lost last time they were on the road, correct? Didn't Kellen Mond, or did Kyle Trask win that game at A&M? Was that the last second win or loss? I don't remember. Was that the year? And then 2020, did they win or lose?
A&M, no. 2020, they lost to A&M. That was like second. That was like the second game of the season.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah.
And it came down to the last. Okay. That's what I thought. So they lost the last time they're there. I don't know. I would not expect to win if I'm a Gator fan on the road.
That's true.
So I think it comes down to the South Carolina game at home. I don't know. 7-5 is best case scenario, I think, for the Gators.
I think so.
Okay, for year one. Okay.
Yeah, it's fine. You got to go to a bowl game, and I think of those 5, I think they're bound to win one of them. So yeah, they just need one of those to get to a bowl. But yeah, Florida, Anthony Richardson, he's a great athlete, but we didn't see it coming into the season, and I think anyone who didn't see the Anthony Richardson hype coming into the season, this is how they saw the 2022 season going for Florida, and it was going to take him being just incredible to turn this into a team that could potentially be a contender. And if he's just going to be still such a raw work in progress, then they're going to be a team that's worried about qualifying for a bowl in the month of November.
I'm curious. I think, and I didn't mention Kentucky in this, but I think Tennessee and Georgia now, and look, I haven't said, like, Tennessee hasn't caught Georgia, but I mean, I don't know if you're keeping up with the recruiting, and Boo Carter and company. Like, the recruiting's coming, so they're going to be right there. They're in the blue chip ratio, and they'll be right there. I think Tennessee is now in that tier close to Georgia, just on offense. And then you look at, and I think the Bama win puts them there. But then you have Kentucky, who has been right there for the last couple of years, and they haven't phased. Like, big bounce back win. Like, they didn't have Levis for a loss. They had a rough loss. I mean, but it was against an undefeated Ole Miss team on the road. That's not a bad loss by any means. It was a rough way to lose. I think they're in a much more stable, just program right now than the Gators and the Gamecocks. Like, I think Florida is in a tough spot for the next couple of years. I think they might be a distant number 4 in this side of the conference for the next couple of years. And I think Florida fans need to be a little bit nervous about where this program can go, because Tennessee and Georgia have figured a lot of stuff out. Obviously, Georgia being the best in the division, but like Kentucky is not going anywhere as long as Stoops is there. Like they're going to keep, they've earned the benefit of the doubt that they're going to keep humming along at 9 to 10 wins a year, just playing their smash mouth defense, running the ball when they want to, and now they get the quarterbacks every now and then with Will Levis and company. I trust the health of Kentucky's football program year over year right now way more than I do Florida and South Carolina. So I don't know. I think
it's just the ceiling is so much higher. The ceiling is just so much higher for Florida, and it's like it's same with Tennessee. Like even when Kentucky was been consistently a better program over the last 5 years or so than Tennessee, it's like they just don't get that much hype, because it's like the ceiling is like a good 10-win team. And it's like we've talked about Wisconsin kind of downgrading their 10 wins. Like, I mean, in all reality, like that's kind of how Kentucky is getting to those 10 wins in years where Tennessee isn't very good, in years where Florida isn't very good, where you're getting Mississippi State out of the West and playing basically nobody out of conference. Like Kentucky never play. They basically have 3 automatic wins on their schedule, and then Louisville is a program who's up and down as well. So it's like you have, I'm not like that's a difficult, not a conference game, Louisville, but it's not exactly a world beater. So it's like you have 4 pretty solid built-in wins a year just out of the conference, and like I feel like Kentucky, as good as they've been those years, there's a reason why. Yeah, they're winning 9-10 games, but people still aren't really scared of them. Like they just don't have that ceiling. Whereas, you know, Tennessee gets good for 1 year or 2 years, like in 2015, 2016, and they were automatically a contender and like a scarier team than Kentucky. Kentucky and Florida, when they're good, they're just better than, or when Tennessee and Florida are good, they're just significantly better than when Kentucky's good. So I know I always sound like a Kentucky hater on here, but it's like, it's just kind of what your program is. It's like the tortoise and the hare or something. Like Kentucky just stays steady. Tennessee will have a bad year, fire their coach, take a few steps behind, but then they just start sprinting ahead and get back ahead of Kentucky. So Kentucky's fine, like for what they are. They're a good team. They just beat Mississippi State this week. But like, yeah, they might be better than Florida, but I don't consistently see them being a better program than Florida. Like the only way they're better than Florida is if Florida hires the wrong guy and goes down the wrong path. And it's like, maybe that's what Billy Napier is, but he's also in year 1. And this was a tough schedule. Like, even though we talked about all the games they got at home, they still had a lot of good teams in the first 7 games for a first-year head coach. Well, and first 8 games now with Georgia next game. So it's not there's a reason Billy Napier's here, right? There was a rebuild that needed to be done with Florida. So I can't say that they're going to be a distant 4 behind Kentucky. Like there might be years where they are 4th behind Kentucky, but I think sooner rather than later, they're going to be right in that conversation with Tennessee, with Georgia, like getting back up to the top of the SEC East. Like maybe more like Tennessee, like this is also 1 year on Tennessee. Like it's year 2 of Heupel, so it feels like this is just the start of, you know, what's beginning. But we also saw year 2 of Dan Mullen, year 1 of Dan Mullen go 10-3, year 2 go 11-2, and year 3 they went to the SEC championship, even though they went 8-4, and then it all went crashing down, right? So you never know. Tennessee feels like they're built on much more solid ground than what Dan Mullen was building at Florida, but you know, time will tell. But I can't see Kentucky necessarily being that 3 ahead of Florida consistently.
I don't think so. I think Kentucky's safe. I think they're in a solid number 3 spot. I would bet on Kentucky the next 3 years winning more games than the Florida Gators comfortably. Granted that Mark Stoops is here. I think Billy Napier feels more like a Jim McElwain to me than an Urban Meyer or a Steve Spurrier. I don't see it there yet. I'm not seeing it, and I would be pretty nervous if I'm a Florida fan right now that like Georgia has Kirby, Tennessee has the offensive whiz, best play caller in the country potentially in Alex Golish and Josh Heupel. And then you have, Kentucky, their identity is so strong. Like, that's the thing, is Kentucky is recruiting really well. They just had one of their best classes ever this past year. And the defense isn't going anywhere. Like, I think this style works, and they've got so many years of building it this way. Back-to-back 10-win seasons? Like, I don't see it. I don't see it crumbling anytime soon. So I think Florida's in a rough spot. I'm pretty dubious about where Florida and South Carolina are going the next couple of years, but I could be wrong.
I can't put Florida in the same conversation with South Carolina, though. It's like South Carolina, I know they had the co-SEC Coach of the Year last year, but they've been at the bottom of the SEC East for a while now. So like the Spurrier years are really more of like an aberration for South Carolina than like Florida. Florida's been with multiple coaches have had them be a contender. Not a lot of coaches, but they have had multiple coaches that they've had top 10 teams with. So Florida, the talent they get, the way they recruit. South Carolina, it takes a perfect storm for them to be back contending for the East. Like Florida, it's going to be much easier, I think, for Florida than South Carolina.
But more than anything, we all agree that Tennessee football is back. Speaking of Kentucky, they played their style and they beat Mississippi State. Mississippi State only had 22 rushing yards in the loss. Will Levis didn't have to do anything in this one, and they still won. Chris Rodriguez almost rushes for 200 yards.
And Will Levis left this game, I think, at the end of the third.
So there's something to monitor when Will Levis and the Cats come to Knoxville in 2 weeks. So we'll see what that looks like. But look, Kentucky deserves credit. Bounce back. They win against a top 20, I think, Mississippi State team in the country. I think even with the loss, Mississippi State's still one of the better programs, not just in the SEC, but nationwide. And they played their ball, and they played bully ball, and they won. And they answered some questions with their running game because they have not been able to run the ball to this point in the year. A lot of that with the offensive line issues. And Mississippi State, stout run defense, stout defense as a whole. And Zach Arnett's bunch got bullied by Rich Gangarello and the Wildcats. What did you make of Kentucky's win?
Yeah, like we talked about this one before. I think this one, more than even giving Kentucky credit, because as much as this is who their identity is, like they have just not done it well all year. So it was hard. It was hard to predict they were going to do it. I feel like we were more predicting that Mississippi State would lay an egg in this one, and it's Mike Leach's teams are like good for a few of these. They can beat anybody and they can lose to anybody, and you just didn't see them show up. Like I know that they're air raid and they're not built on running the football, but I mean having 12 rushing yards, it's like you got to keep defenses honest somehow. And I'm thinking if they have 12 rushing yards, then Will Levis has to have like 65 pass attempts, and this guy was 25 of 37. Like they just couldn't stay on the field. Kentucky was on time of possession almost 40-20 in this game. Like had the ball almost twice as long as Mississippi State did. Chris Rodriguez just makes such a huge difference in this Kentucky team. He's a workhorse. He's Benny Snell-esque for sure for Kentucky, and this is a big time win for Kentucky. I hope Levis isn't seriously injured. That Tennessee game in a few weeks, could be an interesting one. Definitely a contrasting styles, but I definitely don't think they have the offense to hang with Tennessee. But they do pound the rocks. So if they're able to run the ball like this moving forward, I mean, they could win a lot more games. We haven't seen this really from Kentucky basically all year.
Absolutely. What else we got? Clemson, they take care of Florida State. Will Shipley is this engine that keeps moving. He's kind of like had a quiet year, wouldn't you say? Is that he's just doing everything. He's just an absolute dynamo in the passing game. He's DJ's favorite target out wide. Has been electric in the run game. DJ, 3 TDs, no picks. He's doing everything he needs to do. But similar to Alabama, I don't know if you are in the same boat when it comes to the Tigers, but the Justin Rosses, and I don't know why I threw him out first, but in terms of like Mike Williams, T. Higgins, you go down the list, they don't have that this year. And it feels like they haven't had that of late, and I wonder how much that matters into. We talk about the Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson era, where like getting those two quarterbacks back to back is pretty nice, and it's going to win a lot of football games. But it was also they just had so many playmakers along with those guys, and it seems like they're pretty one-dimensional when it comes to DJ running with the football and just put the ball in Will Shipley's hands and let this Christian McCaffrey type, he's sneaky athletic, Will Shipley. And I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. Do you share the Clemson, Alabama lack of playmakers outside being concerning sentiment?
Yeah, I do see that as well. And you put some respect on Hunter Renfro's name, sir. I didn't hear you giving credit to that. He made the Pro Bowl, didn't he, last year? I want to say
that's correct,
for the Raiders.
Sneaky athletic too.
Sneaky, real gym rat. But this game was not nearly as close as the score looked. Florida State got 2 late touchdowns. Like Clemson pretty much dominated this one. And it's good to see. Like Clemson, I feel like each week that's gone by since the Georgia Tech game, maybe really since the first half of the Georgia Tech game, because even that one, they just look pretty mediocre in the first half. But each week that's gone by, I felt like Clemson just looks better and better. Wake Forest, NC State, I feel like they've kind of just progressed a little more difficult each week. So I have to be impressed with what Clemson has shown so far. I think Syracuse is also another one. Like, yeah, they're undefeated. They're top 15, but still kind of questioning how good they are. So, yeah, I'm liking how Clemson's looking. DJ Uiagalelei, like this is what we were expecting to see from him. And like you said about Shipley as well. I was a little disappointed the way he was talked about as like the number one all-purpose back in the country. Didn't really see that much as a freshman. He had some injuries he battled as well. But yeah, you're starting to see why this guy was a 5-star running back coming out of high school.
This comes to us from College Football Home. On Twitter, he said, quote, "In Florida State's 3 consecutive losses, they have outgained all 3 opponents in yards per play. 6.1 versus 5.5 versus Clemson, 6.7 versus 4.4 against NC State, and 6.2 versus 4.8 against Wake." That's tough. I don't know if that's a good sign for the program or it's like, is this a coaching issue, a player? Like, I don't know. I don't know where I lean and where Florida State's headed down the stretch here.
Yeah, that's true. I felt like this was an opportunity too, because Clemson, like you said, they're as good as they have been. They're not what Clemson has been in the past. So they feel more beatable in 2021 and 2022 now than they've been in recent years. So like as a Florida State fan, what were they, 4-2 coming into this one? Like you had to feel like this was your opportunity to maybe get Clemson this year at home, and didn't get it done. So I don't know. We'll see. The jury's still out on Florida State. I think Mike Norvell's job is at least safe now. I mean, knock on wood, he could lose 4 games in a row and everything be changed, but they've at least looked like they've improved as a team here in 2022.
We end on USC going down to Utah in another thriller. Utah not leading really at all in this one, and they win at the very end here. My favorite thing about this, Vince Young had a field pass from Utah for this game. That is some clutch trolling.
Wow.
That is some unreal stuff. So I don't know who in the Utah athletic department deserves their kudos, but putting Vince Young on the field for a USC important win on the road is top-notch stuff. So Vince Young still undefeated against the Trojans.
Yeah, I gotta respect that. This was an amazing game. I similar to Oklahoma State, TCU. Like I kind of thought USC was gonna pull away in this one early, but Utah just stayed in it, and then just the ballsy decision to just go for 2, go for the win at the end of the game. I think the common wisdom, at least in basketball, I think it applies to football as well. Go for the tie at home, go for the win on the road. Mm-hmm. But I think when you don't think you're the better team, you go for the win, honestly. You're like, if we play this thing out for another another quarter, like they're better than us. They'll probably beat us. If you think, hey, now is our chance to win the game, go for the win. So you love to see it. It only gets it. People criticize if it doesn't work, and they praise you if it does. And so Kyle Whittingham, it felt like just for the equilibrium of the Pac-12, like Utah was going to win this game. Like we preseason college football playoff predictions and all that, like they've been underwhelming, but they're still a good team. They had to win this one. Bring everything back. Now we have literally no idea who the best team in the Pac-12 is right now. Just we got that nice pack at the top 4, and I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Same here. Also, we should throw out there were some awful. Look, I don't like doing this more than anybody else. Some awful roughing the passer penalties late in this one that gave Utah life. That USC fans, it brings me no joy to throw this out there, but USC got hosed with this game late. I will say that. I don't know if you saw the roughing the passer calls late, but they were very much like the NFL equivalent that we've seen over the last couple weeks, the Grady Jarrett and stuff. It wasn't the body weight aspect of it, but it was a pretty horrible call that extended the Utah drives that ended up being the difference here.
Yeah, we just need to see. We need a rule book. Like we need a demonstration for roughing the passer at all levels of football. Like what is allowed and what is not allowed. Like these defensive linemen, these linebackers, like how few opportunities in a game do they have to hit the quarterback? Like that's literally what half the guys on that side of the ball's entire job is to hit the quarterback. And they finally get an opportunity to hit him, and you're like, no, you're not supposed to hit him like that. You're supposed to hit him a little lower. You're supposed to hit him a little higher. You can't fall on him like that when you hit him. You can wrap him up, but you can't like throw him when you kind of wrap it. You can't roll over on. It's like, what are we doing here? Like, so yeah, it's unfortunate. It is what it is. I would think if we're playing politics, USC gets the benefit of the doubt, right? They're the one carrying the torch for the Pac-12, trying to make that college football playoff money. What are the refs doing out there?
Hey, fair enough. Matt Green, it's time for our stickers of the week, sir. Who made your helmet stickers?
My helmet stickers, which I'm sure is one of yours. Jalin Hyatt. I mean, this guy was 85% from the field, 6 catches, 5 touchdowns, just absolutely couldn't be stopped. Chris Rodriguez for Kentucky, almost 200 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. And then also Cam Rising for Utah getting the win. Actually, I'm going to take that back. Not Cam Rising. Dalton Kincaid for Utah. Did you see this, man? Like, no shade to Cam Rising. You're the quarterback. You're the one who had to get him the rock. But this tight end, talking about Cameron Latu not being a tight end you just feed, Dalton Kincaid had 15 targets, 15 catches for 217 yards and a touchdown. Give this man a helmet sticker. 100%, 15 targets, 15 catches.
Also been there forever, Dalton Kincaid, I seem to recall.
I'll take your word for that one.
Let me pull up how old Dalton Kincaid is. I want to say this man is, let's see, 22. He turns 23 tomorrow. Okay. Happy early birthday.
He turns 23 tomorrow. There you go. Birthday present. Getting fed the rock and beating the Trojans. Big time win.
Yeah, Jalin Hyatt, for me, I'm giving the entire Tennessee offensive line for their effort, and then Blake Corrum, who I think deserves to be in the Heisman conversation. I think he's right there with Hendon Hooker, C.J. Stroud, and Bryce Young are my 4 at the moment. Do you have a different one?
I don't know if Bryce Young is in my top 4. As good as he's been, I like your other
something else. Man.
I like your other ones, but Jahmyr Gibbs, I honestly have been more impressed by in Alabama's offense than than Bryce Young so far. He also missed a game, missed a half against Arkansas. But, yeah, I think Jahmyr Gibbs, like you said, Blake Corrum, Hendon Hooker, I think that's who you got to put right there at the top. C.J. Stroud, obviously. C.J. Stroud, Ohio State's just like no one's watching their game. Like, we just see, oh, yeah, Ohio State beat someone 49-17. Let's just keep on moving. I'm waiting for them to play the Penn States, the Michigans, and really we can finally kind of size them up and figure out who they are as a team.
There you go. Matt Green, anything else we missed that you want to hit real quick as we wrap up here?
Oh, one last thing. We were talking about the unbeatens. Ole Miss this week. They're still one of the unbeatens. We got 9 unbeatens left. 34 points they allowed against Auburn. And this Auburn team came in averaging, I think, 14 points a game in 4 or 5 games versus Power 5 competition. And they were in a shootout with Ole Miss. Like, as good of a story as Ole Miss has been so far, they got LSU next week. I could see them being on upset alert. Ole Miss they're a ticking time bomb, I feel like, at some point. They haven't necessarily been as dominant as the 6-0 record looks. But yeah, that's all I got.
That's fair. That's fair. Tank Bigsby went off. Robbie Ashford, another terrible loss. I don't know what they're doing with Harsin. I guess they're just going to let this thing ride out to the end and just not deal with an interim for the rest of the season.
I mean, you run your risk of them doing something and beating Alabama or something. They're like, oh, now we have to keep him around. Like, just go ahead and fire him so that he can't pull the Dan Quinn and finish the season strong, and then you decide to keep his job. Like, we all know this thing's done. Like, just rip off the Band-Aid. Go get Matt Rule. Go get Deion Sanders. Lane Kiffin. Go get your next guy that the administration actually believes in. That's got his roots in the Southeast. Like, they don't like Harsin. Like, Harsin, I did respect the facial hair. Harsin was getting a real Grizzly Adams on the sideline this weekend. I don't know if he's growing it out or if he just missed a day shaving. I think he might have the same kind of facial hair success that me and you have. Harsin, it didn't look too great, but I think he's trying to grow it out.
Hey, maybe I will. I don't know. All I can do is a goatee. Nothing else. This is so patchy over here. I can't really do much.
Yeah, I just wait like a day and shave, and it looks like you got kind of a 5 o'clock shadow, and then it's like 2 more days, and you're like, oh, so it just really just doesn't really grow in, huh?
Yeah, that's just my deal. So there you go. Matt Green, that is all I've got, my friend. We can find you on Twitter, Matt_W_Green. Don't forget, folks, this is a daily podcast that you can subscribe to on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you are a new listener, we greatly appreciate it and hope you return to this very program. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you enjoyed it, tell a friend, family member, coworker about the podcast. And thank you if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe, comment below, all that good stuff in our YouTube videos on youtube.com/Chase Thomas Podcast. For that guy down there in Tequila, Georgia, Matt Green, for myself up here in Knoxville, Tennessee, that is all I've got, sir. And I will talk to you in a couple days.
Yes, sir.